We heard that the Hmong have a new village, and there aren't many people there. Living in our old village, our farm is far away, since the nearby lands are all taken by other villagers. One day, I talked to two of my older brothers about moving to the new village. They advised me to take my family there first, hoping to secure a nice piece of land close to the village for farming. During our family meeting, my parents and grandfather expressed their desire to move to the new village as well. Therefore, I took my wife, two daughters, parents, and grandpa with me to the new village. Upon arrival, we found that there weren't many people yet. Everyone in the new village was very welcoming, helping us build our new house and choose a farm close to the village. The village was surrounded by bamboo and was far from the city, embodying the very definition of freedom. However, there was a peculiar rule in the village. According to everyone, since we lived so far from other villages, we had to keep the place quiet. We were required to finish everything during the daytime and ensure everyone went back inside the house after sunset, avoiding making too much noise at night to prevent attracting evil spirits. As more people moved in, the village grew, and we no longer adhered to the rule of going inside our houses after sunset. Everyone enjoyed staying outside after sunset when it was cool and breezy. One night after dinner, everyone was outside talking and enjoying the breeze. My daughters were playing with other villagers' kids, despite the village chief's warning to go inside and keep the noise down. We stayed until it was almost bedtime. Everyone was ready to go back inside, so I asked my wife to bring our daughters home. That night, my wife told me that when she went to get our daughters, they were playing with some unfamiliar kids. She hadn't seen those kids in the village before and didn't know who they belonged to. I asked if our daughters were the only ones playing with the unfamiliar kids, and my wife mentioned that other kids in the village as well. However, there were some kids she didn't recognize. When everyone was heading home, those kids just stood around, watching as if they had no parents to tell them to go home. I reassured her, suggesting that maybe they were new arrivals in the village. The next morning, the village chief called for a meeting at his place, but I couldn't attend as I had a stomach issue. Then the day after the village meeting, the chief's daughter passed away in her sleep, marking the first death in the village. The villagers quickly organized a 3-day funeral and buried her at the edge of the village, designating it as the village graveyard. Strangely, the chief and his family left the village immediately after burying his daughter. When the chief and his family still lived with us, he enforced rules against playing after sunset. Perhaps he knew something we didn't. After the chief and his family's departure, my father fell ill. Initially a stomach issue, it escalated to what he described as knife-stabbing pain. He slept all day, but woke up at night, moaning and eventually meowing like a cat. After a brief illness, my father passed away, becoming the second death in our village. Following my father's burial, more villagers fell ill and quickly died. Strange cats started lingering around the graveyard, and more of them entered the village during sunset, resembling little children. This reminded me of the unfamiliar kids my wife mentioned. As more people got sick and died, villagers began leaving until only my family and another family, Cha and his wife, remained. We stayed because my grandpa was getting sick, and Cha's wife recently gave birth, making travel difficult. My grandpa, sleeping all day and waking up around sunset, would respond to a meowing sound from the graveyard.
Meow. Meow.
The meow started as a regular cat's meow, but resembled my father's when it got darker. Knowing my grandpa's weakened state and his eventual passing, I dug a hole near the woven bamboo wall of our house for a quick burial once he passed. Cha approached us, expressing his family's desire to leave with us once my grandpa passed. I agreed to inform him when the time came and asked him to return at sunset to show him something. At sunset, Cha returned, and I took him outside to listen. Hearing my grandpa's meowing from the bedroom, Cha got scared and wanted to leave before it got dark. After Cha left, my wife and I bathed outside while my mother and daughters watched over Grandpa, who was still very sick. Later, my mother claimed to have seen my father sitting in the hole I dug for my grandpa. Assuming she was missing my father, I dismissed it. However, she insisted she saw him. She said, "You don't know, but your father's side of the family are considered as unclean, which means they tend to come back after they've died." That night, Grandpa seemed like he wouldn't make it until the morning. He had a high fever, and his body was very hot and cold. We lit a small candle on the side of Grandpa's bed. My mother and I stayed up until almost midnight. Then I told my mother that if she's tired, then go sleep with my wife and daughters in the other room. After my mother went to sleep, I started dozing off. I would hear what sounded like my father outside the woven bamboo wall, whispering to my grandpa. But when I woke up, I didn't hear anything. I must be dreaming or something. After a few times of hearing this, I couldn't sleep anymore. But I wanted to see if what I was hearing was actually real. I pretended to doze off again as I paid close attention. Then I heard it. I heard my father from outside the wall. He whispered to my grandpa, "Hurry, hurry before they leave." Then I heard my grandpa whisper back, "Tomorrow." My father responded from outside, "If you don't hurry, I'm hungry. I'll go see if there's anything to eat in this village." After that, I didn't hear the two whispering anymore. I pretended to wake up again. I knew what I had heard. My mother was right. Maybe my father was sitting inside the hole outside the wall earlier. I stayed up past midnight, and that's when I heard a gunshot. When I heard that, I got scared. I didn't know why there was a gunshot. There were only my family and Cha's family left. I knew that gunshot had to be Cha. Something might have happened at his place. Maybe something happened to his family. I'm scared to go see what's going on, because if I go, there's no man left in our family. There's still my grandpa, but he's too sick. Plus, after what I heard him say to my father earlier, I don't want to leave my family alone with my grandpa. I don't know what my grandpa meant earlier when he told my father, "Tomorrow." I sat and rested my head on Grandpa's bed and fell asleep towards the morning. When my family and I woke up the next morning, Grandpa was still alive. His eyes remained shut, but he was still breathing. However, this time his fever was gone. He was very cold to the touch. After breakfast, Grandpa stopped breathing. He finally passed. My mother said for us to put on his funeral clothes before he becomes stiff, because very sick people tend to become stiff faster when they die. I helped my wife and mother put the funeral clothes on my grandpa. There was no one to help us, but we were going to do what we knew about traditional funeral and planned to keep him for one night and bury him tomorrow. After we put the funeral clothes on my grandpa, I told my mother and my wife that I'm going to run over to Cha's house and tell him and his family to get ready to leave with us the next morning. I ran over to Cha's house, but from afar, I saw a corpse lying face down on top of Cha's roof. The corpse had the same funeral clothes we put on my father when he died. I got scared, and since I didn't see Cha or his wife from afar, I didn't want to go any closer. I'm not sure if Cha and his wife saw what's on top of their roof, but maybe they already saw it and left, or maybe something happened to them. I don't know. I was scared, so I just ran back home. When I got back home, I told my wife and my mother what I saw when I went over to Cha's house. I also told them about what Grandpa said to my father last night. My mother said, Your grandpa said to your father, "Tomorrow?" Maybe what he meant is that he's going to die tomorrow and wake back up. I'm afraid that might happen because this village is eerily cold. After a while, my grandpa became stiff. We stayed and mourned him that day. Around sunset, my wife and I were packing food into 2 hollow bamboo sticks, while my mother and daughters went outside to take a bath first. While my wife and I were packing, we heard Grandpa start meowing from the bedroom.
Meow. Meow.
We looked at each other scared. I said to my wife loudly, "The sun is setting. It's about to get dark, so let's go take a bath really quickly and come back inside before it gets dark." I may say that, but my wife knows exactly what I meant. I want Grandpa to think that we're coming back, so that he would wait inside the house while we flee the village. That way, he don't come chasing after us once it gets dark. We both just brought with us the 2 bamboo sticks with food in them and left everything we packed inside the house. We were going to leave the village before it really gets dark. We walked outside and chained the door. We walked over to my mother and daughters and told them to put their clothes back on. We're leaving the village. My mother asked me why we're leaving. It's about to get dark. I told her that Grandpa seems like he's waking back up, and that's why we don't want to stay another night. They put on their clothes, and we left the village that night. We actually walked all night back to our old village. When we got to our old village, the chickens began to crow. It was already morning. My sister-in-law had just gotten up to make rice. That's when we knocked on their door and let them know that it is us. We don't know what happened to Cha and his family during that time. A few years later, my brother and I had to go get a shaman from a Hmong village to come and help us. When we went to that Hmong village, that's when I met Cha again. He and his wife are doing well. Their son is already big, and they already have 2 more kids. Cha and I started talking about that deserted village. I told Cha my side of the story, and he told his side of the story to me. He said that after we left, my grandpa actually got up and went over to their house. My grandpa was trying to grab their baby from outside the bamboo wall. Cha cut off 2 of his fingers and shot at him. We Hmong never want to move from place to place, but there are only 2 things that will make us move. One is war. The other is when you live in a place where there are evil spirits, and people start dying. Those are the only 2 things that cause Hmong to move away. For us Hmong, we prefer to stay in one place instead of constantly moving. That's all for this video. Thank you for making all the way through and supporting my stories. Have a wonderful day or night.